I'm going to get started, and if people join, I'll give it a quick recap. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. For those of you that know me, nice to see everybody again. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Gabriel Fairman. I'm the founder and CEO of BureauWorks. It's really nice to be here with everybody today. I've been doing what I'm doing for nearly 18 years now, so it's continues to be a fun and learning experience. So always exciting, and very thankful for everybody in our team and all our clients, translators, all our community. We're very excited with latest developments and happy to share with everybody. All right, so I'm going to get started here. By the way, I'm recording, and we'll share the recording later, so no need to worry about jotting down any notes. Also, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'll be looking every so often at the chat and try to get back to any questions. I think, yeah, I'll try to make it, I'll try to pause every now and there to make it as interactive as I can. And all right, let's get to it. Share my screen. Okay, perfect. Can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Okay. Yep. So this is our translation editor, by the way. That's where we're going to spend most of our time, but I'm going to start by presenting a few slides just to go over what we're going to show today. So let me present. Perfect. All right, so we're going to go over today how our current integration with GPT 3.5 looks like. We also have other LLMs that our API is currently integrating with, and filtering information and parsing in a way that makes sense for us from a machine learning perspective. I'll get into that as well. But yeah, that's the basic goal, and I'm going to try to tie it back to business use cases, but really it's going to be more technical around how working with a large language model that's able to infer probabilistically, always the next word, can produce really interesting results when it comes to translations. All right, so just a very quick recap. Most businesses have very similar needs: more for less, quicker, right? I mean, that's basically what every business is looking for. And again, anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but basically BureauWorks has, as a TMS, has a few different aspects to it. Today, we're going to spend more time in the web editor, and that's the part that really has the most contact points with GPT 3.5. So at least for now, so that's where we're going to spend most of our time in. And this I'm going to try to exemplify more, but basically what I'm going to show you is how through machine learning we're able to dynamically mesh together glossaries with translation memories and machine translation. The machine translation obviously can come through any different machine translation that's integrated with BureauWorks. TMs can be any number of TMs that you have configured at your project level, but the magic of it is really the ability to change terminology on the fly and have this synchronous dance between machine translation, translation memory, and glossary. This is all very, very new. We're still collecting a lot of data about it, a lot of feedback about it. It's not far from anything. I'm not pitching this as the holy grail, but so far I've been very, very impressed with everything I've seen. and just to explain the key difference again, just to explain. So typically, what I call the previous paradigm, you have basically text that's processed, obviously parsed, and then processed against a translation memory. Typical TMS behavior is, okay, when I don't have a translation memory feed above a certain threshold, I'll default either to leave it blank during the pre-translation or to populate it with MT. That's typically the definition of pre-translation. And what we're working towards is text that gets parsed and then gets processed through a mesh of TM plus MT plus glossaries plus large language models, which is what we call context-aware pre-translation with large language models. And the difference is so far very significant. We've seen in certain use cases already 30% decrease in edit distance. We've seen at the very least 20% decrease in time to edit. And it's an iterative feed. I'll go into that as well, which provides more possibilities for translation improvement. And these are a few screenshots that illustrate exactly what I'm going to show. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in these screenshots. I'm going to minimize this presentation for now and go into our translation editor. And before I go on, let me see if anybody has any questions. Hello Marina, hello Yordanka, hello Mariela, hello Kostya, hello iPhone, Naja. Hello everybody who's here. Very nice to be here with everybody. Okay, so this is our translation editor. I'm very limited as far as languages that I can speak decently enough not to make a complete fool of myself. So that's why I'm conducting this demo in English and Portuguese. Those are two languages that I can at least get by in. But one of the things that we'll be working on moving forward is running these demos in different languages so that we can illustrate the behavior across different languages, because it is quite different. We've already noticed that in certain languages, performance is a lot more interesting than in others. And again, please bear in mind also that things that let me see here, we have someone else in the chat. Message. Oh, hello everybody. All right, so let's get started. So just to show exactly what I mean, let's click on this segment here. And okay, so right now, VeraWorks just translated this using the AI translation, and let's see, we can clearly see the difference. Like, just let's apply this translation. I'll apply the machine translation for now. And you can see just from the tokenization structure of our glossary, even if you don't speak Portuguese, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 glossary terms that are mapped out in the target, and only 2 that are present in the 4 terms mapped out in the source, only 2 mapped out in the target correspondingly. And that's because the machine translation doesn't, at least the engine that we're connected right now, doesn't inject terms directly into the glossary. And even if it did, it won't necessarily change the verbiage around the terms to make sure that the sentence structure is working. But the machine translation in this segment is actually pretty good. It's not incorrect by any means. Could be, it may be written in a different tone, with different styles. I'm not gonna argue that, but as far as machine translation goes, it's preserving semantic integrity, at least at first glance. So, and what I'm going to do, when I apply, now I just applied the AI translation, and now you immediately notice that there is a one-to-one mapping of whatever was in. So in our glossary, we have the word serenity, curated, translation, project engineers, and all these terms were correctly respected. Not only were they respected, but the verbiage around all of these terms makes sense. So, and it's, in this case, it's good enough for me as a reviewer to confirm this segment. But I can also ask GPT for a second set of eyes on this translation. And so let's see what GPT says when it's asked to review. And it's suggesting this new translation for that segment, and it explaining its suggestion, saying that the translation replaces the word depurada with selecionada to better convey. Those are very synonymous words, in my opinion. Thank you, GPT, but I'm not going to apply your comment. But it is interesting, and this is something that we've heard already a lot from translators working with our tool, which is sometimes you get, even if you don't apply the GPT feedback, it's already creating an interesting kind of dialogue and promoting a second set of eyes around something that maybe you have, maybe you're not entirely sure about how something is being expressed. But I'm going to pause over here and check in the chat if anybody has any questions. Feel free to put them right there, right now. Otherwise, I'm going to go on. Any questions, anybody? And also feel free to raise your hand. I can also look for that as well. Okay, Jamil, go ahead.
Yeah, so can you explain a bit what's the difference between using the AI to translate the content versus using the AI to suggest you? What's the difference on both scenarios? So why the AI suggestion translation is different from the AI review?
Perfect. Yeah, I'll get into that. That's a great question. But I'm going to first answer Alexis' question here. Can you apply the AI translation at the pre-translation step? It's possible. From an API perspective, one of the things that we're working around are the rate limits around the OpenAI API. So we're working pretty closely with their technical team, because our use case, as it results in a large amount of content being processed per minute, it goes way over their API rate limits, and that kind of jams the possibility for you to pre-translate an entire document at once. So right now we're doing it basically segment per segment, but if I just show you an example here, let's say this segment is blank. If I click on it, it's pre-translating that specific segment. As far as, that's not an obstacle though, as far as log files go, we'll take into account the feed that's offered a translator, regardless of whether it was pre-processed as entirely or not. But I hope that answers your question. So it is possible to pre-translate using this mechanism, but right now we're still working around rate limits around OpenAI's API. And now regarding your question, Jamil, very good question, by the way, thank you so much. There's a key difference, at least, and this is by design, right? So let me open another segment here. Just let's see here, something that's cool. Okay, yeah. And that was the exact segment that I was showing. So Jamil pointed out, for instance, in this segment, the word curated is in the glossary, and the glossary instructs it to be translated as depurada. And when I asked the AI to review, and maybe this time it's actually going to be a different suggestion, but it suggested, GPT suggested to change the word curada for selecionada. And right now it's also changing depurada for selecionada, but it's explaining it in a different way. So now it's saying that the suggested, and it's also making other changes. The suggested translation is more concise, it uses more natural language, it replaces sin problemas with de forma fluida to make the sentence sound more natural, also replaces depurada with selecionada. So what's very important to notice is GPT by design is not necessarily going to give the same answer to the same prompt and the same text and the same context. By design, it's not, because it's a probabilistic engine, it's not designed to always deliver the same output, because otherwise it can't learn from its mistakes. So that's a very essential component of machine learning, right? As far as when we ask GPT to review the translation, we're not giving it context on purpose. So we're not giving it the translation memory, we're not giving it the glossaries, we're not feeding it more context other than the text itself, because this review by design is meant to be kind of like another set of eyes, right? So for let's abstract from TM, TB, and does the sentence sound good? Where could it be improved? So so that's very different than this scenario here, when I ask AI to translate and I hit this button, or that's going to mesh, and let's apply the translation, that's going to mesh TMs, TBs, and MT. Did that answer your question, Jamil? Hope so. And Alexis, did that, hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so Alexis, this makes sense. Perfect. Okay, so let me go on and pick a few other examples. So I'm going to look for one where, okay, here, I think this is an interesting one. Here, perfect. Yeah, perfect. So this is a cool example. There's no TM for this segment, and machine translation really botched this one because it didn't understand that bureau works was a proper term. So it translated it as literally a bureau that works in Portuguese, but it also did not translate trust. So it thought that the company name was Trust Bureau as opposed to Bureau Works. And again, I don't blame it for the mistake. It's a complicated name. But yeah, this is an example of a machine translation fail. What happens when I ask AI to translate it, it was able, even without context, it was able to understand that Bureau Works was the name, and it was able to understand that trust was a verb. So there is, so the iterative component is that we're using the machine translation as a base level and improving on it when suggesting the feed. So now I can confirm this segment, and I can also ask AI to review it if I would like. And again, and to improve this translation, you could add more context to the sentence. So yeah, suggesting stuff that I would definitely not do. I wouldn't make it wordier. But again, you do have that second set of eyes that suggests things if and when necessary, right? So let me see, I think I have another question here. Gabriel, have you done a side-by-side comparison between MT and ChatGPT translations? Yes, we have. We'll share with anybody that's interested. We produced already a 55-page report in, I think, 4 or 5 different languages that we've studied more deeply, comparing MT with GPT. What we've observed so far, in a nutshell, and it does vary significantly across languages, but so far what we've seen is, without context, and by context I mean all of the structure, right? So for instance, either like not being offered a pre-translation from a machine translation engine, not being offered a glossary, not being offered a TM, right? Just like with zero-shot learning, right? Just comparing in text into TM, into an MT, in text into GPT. When the text, basically, when the linguistic structure gets more sophisticated, more idiomatic, it clearly outperforms MT. When this linguistic structure is simpler, it performs kind of the same. But when it really outdoes MT is when you mesh, like I'm doing right now in the demo, when you mesh translation memory with glossaries and you allow GPT to learn from your context. So and again, everybody that's here will be happy to share our 55-page report. Let me see if I have more questions. Rena has a question, by the way. I love an example. Okay, thank you so much. Glossary one TM. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. Those are exactly the more people in the waiting room. Those are exactly the concepts that we're showing. So let me grab another example here. And this one is going to be, I think, kind of, it'll show even better in the sense that, so if I show here, let's take a look at TM differences. I have a 72% match in this case. Let me clear the segment. So I have a 72% match. It's relatively similar, but some words were delete. One word was changed. Offers became delivers, and engagement models was not present in the TM. We also have a machine translation, and we cannot see, for instance, if you apply the machine translation, I have one glossary term present in the source, only three, sorry, in the source, only one in the target. It's clearly not respecting our glossary use, and it's also not taking into account, obviously, what's in the TM because it's coming from a completely different engine. When I ask AI to translate, and I apply this translation, now I can see the one-to-one correspondence of the tokenized glossary terms. And I can see here, so these are the three terms that I had. And also what I want to show you is on the fly how this works. So let me pick a segment here that's something that I'd like to change. Let me see. Oh, and by the way, this is the live preview of what the site is. This is a website, and it's our homepage. This is what the translations are rendering like. Okay, this is actually a pretty cool one. So if I look at the machine translation, I'm going to apply it. Not only is it not respecting the glossary terms, but it's also an absurd kind of machine translation. Doesn't make a lot of sense. In Portuguese, when let me scratch that, and again, let me click on the segment. Now, BWX is already pre-translating this correctly, respecting not only both glossary terms, but making it sound in more natural, right? I think we can take a super veloz, blazing turnaround. I like it. Let me see if AI has something to say about it. And it's changing it a little bit. I think it's like ultra hot better. Ultra super synonymous, but yeah, let's go with ultra. So I would change this to laws, and if I do that, that'll create a glossary mismatch. I'll confirm this because I overrode what was previously in the glossary. See here in the chat, what activity going on. Oh, Rodrigo sent the link to our paper in the chat. Is there any way to show hidden characters? By hidden characters, can you explain that? I'm not sure I understood exactly what is meant by hidden characters. Okay, this is, I think, a good example. So like right now, there's nothing in the glossary for segment 28. There's a 93% translation memory match. There's a machine translation for this. Let's make this blank, and let's not translate stakeholders. So I'm adding stakeholders to the glossary, and it's a noun, and I'm going to save this. So now it's tokenized stakeholders. Let me see something else. And I know that it's saying here cotações. Let's say quotes are estimativas, just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so now we have two glossary terms, and let's go out. Yeah, we'll translate it. And this is what's so cool. So it's taking into account the translation memory. It's using the similar syntactical structure as what was present in the TM. but it is injecting both terms I just tokenized, and it's making the sentence make sense. And I'm going to pause just here because, like, to me, and maybe, no, obviously I'm drinking all my Kool-Aid, and I think it's pretty cool. But what I just did, to me, is really amazing, right? So just to recap, right? I added terms to the glossary on the fly, and the engine integrated with GPT was able to mesh what's in the machine translation engine, what's coming from the machine translation engine or engines, what's coming from the TM or TMs, and the glossary, infusing everything together in runtime. So yeah, I'm not sure if everybody was able to follow. I'll show a few more times in different examples, but that is, in a nutshell, the key breakthrough, right? It's being able to, in another lifetime, a few weeks ago, we would have had to have a trained machine translation environment with glossary injection. Not always the glossary is going to be, as the glossary changes, the environment would have to be updated, retrained, and the feeds won't always be able to grammatically and syntactically adapt to the terminology. So that's the key difference. Let me see here in the chat. How does that work in technical terms? Oh, just a sec, Kostya, I'll get to your questions. If you need to translate a sentence so it fits a certain character's limits, and then G's suggestion, can you ask the AI to rephrase and shorten? It's a great question. Right now, no, but one of the, like, in our mind, this is what we've been learning, right? Sending content back and forth to OpenAI's API is very simple. Getting the calls to do exactly what you want them to do in a predictable and scalable manner, that gets very complex very quickly. But in your question, for instance, as far as not only can we ask AI to rephrase it, but we can also flag not the expanded length, but for instance, things that are, one example is like, so with character limits we don't need to, okay, so let me take a step back. So with character limits, we can detect the character overflow, and yes, we can instruct GPT to rephrase it. It's not currently configured like that, but we're building on it, and that's a very good idea, by the way. Okay, so Maria Johansson said like blank spaces. Yeah, all hidden characters are shown. So if there's a blank space, you would see one. But maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly. Kostya, as far as how it works in technical terms, well, I'm not the most technical person, but I'll take a stab at it. We're using combinations of machine learning techniques, namely zero-shot and few-shot learning, in order to guide GPT's thought process, basically. And we're working through what we call iterative, pulverized interactions with GPT. So instead of having a single call and a single response, we're working iteratively in every single segment to try to get to the output that we're looking for. I'm not sure if that clarifies your question, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, how it works. So, okay, what would you like to know exactly? Let's see, how does it handle tags such as formatting HTML tags? Handles those tags really well. In the demo that I'm doing today, I'm not focusing on tags, but it positions tags perfectly without any additional work. Of course, if you would like to exactly tell me what you would like to know from a technical perspective, I'll be happy to go into it as far as I can. Otherwise, we do have technical papers on this as well that we can make available if necessary. I think Maria's question is about non-print characters, like non-breaking spaces, like line breaks, so can they be displayed? Sure. So in this case, let's see, iteration. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Maybe we can go. We can talk about it in a separate setting. That's fine. I'm not going to go that far as to iterations and code, etc. As far as non-print characters like non-breaking spaces, can they be displayed? The way if you have like a non-breaking space and any code, it will be parsed and tagged. And in this case, for instance, where we don't have any of those, but if I were to open a code file, you'd be able to see that. All right, so let me pause here and show one more example. Okay, so over here again, another example. We have 88% translation memory feed, a machine translation feed, nothing in the glossary. Let's add providers to the glossary. Right now it's calling providers provedores. We want to call providers fornecedores. Let's add that to the glossary. Perfect. And let's see if I want to add anything else. No, I think that's fine. I'm going to ask AI to translate it. And again, now it's respecting the terminology and it's adapted the feed coming from the translation memory to what was just added to the glossary. And one of the key things I want to highlight is, let me go back here to this presentation, just to tie it back to potential business applications, right? There are a few, in my opinion, nagging issues when it comes to managing small, medium, and large scale translation programs, but these problems, in my opinion, they get worse when programs get bigger. So a big problem is keeping the TMs fresh. So for instance, it's very common that a TM is built over many, many, many years. And what ultimately happens is that you start to have stale TM, where, for instance, maybe it's 101% match, but it's no longer matching whatever is newest in the glossary. And that's a problem, right? Because either the program is forced to review 101% matches and 100% matches, which will become very expensive very quickly, or to keep them stale, right? With this business application, for instance, you would be able to, and it's a setting, right? In ViewWorks, you can toggle it on or off. But if you toggle it on, you would be able to, in principle, have AI review context feeds on the fly, which would ensure that you're constantly injecting the newest terminology to that translation memory. You can also, so that's a very clear business application, at least for me, that solves quite a few different problems. As far as other business applications, we're talking about diminishing turnaround times, we're talking about improving consistency, talking about diminishing edit distance and diminishing time to edit. So let me see here if I have any more questions. Okay. Until ChatGPT queries for different languages, I would be curious to know who says it. Yeah, we do have RTL tests, not in this report that Rodrigo just shared, but yes, so far what we've seen is that the performance has been very different for different languages. Which mechanism do you have in place to deliver context open AI? Any solution to CAT tools being segment-based? Yeah, we've been working pretty well with working around the limitation. I understand GPT prefers longer pieces of text than shorter, but we've been getting really good results even with segment-based. But that's just I think something that's going to be more and more present. That's at least our vision is likely to. not necessarily dissolve, but at least the way we see it, we're probably going to see find ways to make segmentation become more fluid, actually through AI as well. So that's a really good question. But so far we've been able to get very good responses without working with paragraphs. And again, that's because we're using few shot learning and in sentences. Initially, the results we had working with sentences was very weak. And as far as mechanisms we have in place to deliver context to OpenAI's API, we're using, like I said, we're not going to go super into the details, at least for this demo, but basically we're using different endpoints to communicate what's present in the glossary, what's present in the TM. That's what becomes the context. And as far as the specific mechanisms, a lot of that is proprietary to the API that we've built. And it's an entire API that's separate from your works that communicates with GPT as far as the technical details. So I'm going to show again one more example, just because I don't get tired of this again. So this is another example. So autopilot, in this case, I don't want to translate it. There's nothing in the glossary. Right now, there's 100% feed. So that's the example that I was providing. Let's say, for instance, okay, I don't want to translate autopilot anymore. I've decided that it's a proper noun. Now it's flagged that. We remove this and click out, put it back in. And even though it was present in the translation memory as a 100% match, now it overrode that and injected the autopilot glossary term correctly into the TM. Now I can confirm that. Again, to me, that's pretty cool. As terms get added to the glossary, you are able to continuously keep a translation memory up to date and fresh without having to entirely review that. A few other things that we're working on is, and that goes back also to Naja's comment, is we're working on verification that goes beyond traditional QA, and so we've been exploring. There are quite a few interesting papers on it as well, but we've been exploring with scoring mechanisms and semantic error detection. So going beyond just syntax, results are still in the works, but we're seeing a lot of promise as far as being error detection that goes beyond just traditional linear QA. Anything else? Great improvement. Thank you, Brianna. Appreciate it. Yeah, this is super exciting, and again, for maybe people that aren't in our field, it doesn't seem like something that special, but to me, it's pretty cool. Again, this is let's show another example now with a larger segment. This doesn't have any glossary terms, and let's start adding a few terms. Okay, so organizational units. Let's not translate this. Put that in English. So it's tokenize that, and let's look at it. Let's add, change this to rentabilidade. All right, so let's ask AI to translate this. Oh, interesting. So this is a good, interesting case. So, and it does show, for instance, in this case, rentabilidade was respected, but organizational units was not respected. And that does happen occasionally where GPT will not, again, because it's a probabilistic engine, it's not 100% deterministic that it will always be able to take into account what we're feeding it, particularly if it's goes against the grain of something that it reads as incorrect. So yeah, that's a good example too, that it's not a 100% infallible, right? By design, it will produce occasionally different outputs, but it was able to take into account one of the glossary terms. All right, so we're getting, let me open another one here. Here. We have a 78% match, no glossary terms. This question, sorry. So, okay, so let's change this. Let's change this to combustível, which is actually present in the machine translation feed, but not in the TM. So the machine translation feed in this case has combustível, whereas the word fuel in English has been translated as hélice in the TM. Let's ask AI to translate this. Let's apply the translation, and it's respecting. So basically, it's meshing again the TM with the MT, but respecting the glossary term. Does the context panel remain static, or does it move along with the strings depending on the file? Yeah, it remains static. The context requires people to scroll through the preview in order to be able to see the text that they're on. So that, but that is something interesting that we have definitely on the radar. The idea that whenever you click on a segment, that it updates automatically the preview. How does GPT deal with extremely segmented text, such as SRT videos? It's still able to get the context. I think this is a great question, and just to clarify that there's a key difference between context when it comes to like translation and literature, and context when it comes to machine learning. Context in translation, for instance, is, let's say, the sentence above it and the sentence below it, and all the sentences above it and all the sentences below it, right? That's the literal definition of context. Context in machine learning is different. Context in machine learning could be the sentence above, could be the sentence below. Hold on, I'll go get back to Boria. Could be the sentence, but it can also be any kind of meta information that impacts the text. So for instance, a prompt could suggest the context. For instance, be more informal, be more formal, if that's the prompt, that is context. Use these glossary terms, don't use these terms, that is context. Any information that's processed by a machine learning engine other than the information itself is context, right? So as far as highly segmented text, because of the combination of zero-shot and few-shot learning that we're using, regardless of the segmentation, we're able to see interesting results. Obviously, with shorter sentences in general, engines have a harder time than with longer sentences, just because it's more like there is like less linguistic context for it to work with. But yeah, we haven't seen a problem with that. As far as the visual representation of where the string is, no, there's no visual representation where the string is. So it's not highlighting, for instance, where the string is in the preview. But that is something very cool to have. Any other questions before I wrap up? I think I've covered most of the ground that I wanted. This is available, by the way. Anybody who would like to to do a free trial. It's available for 14 days for free, any commitments. We've enabled it for trials. Any use cases except translation that you integrate? No, for now, we've just been focusing on translation, but we're looking and expanding and seeing how we can use GPT to change and automate the behavior around BureauWorks in general, but we're really focusing on the translation use case for now. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, I'm going to wrap up just with one last one because I do like this. So again, in this case, localization management should be gestão de tradução. The TM does have that term correctly used. The machine translation does not. And let's take a look at what happens when AI translate that. And apply the translation, and there you go. The glossary is mapped 1-to-1. Let's ask AI to review one last time. Oh, and let me, before I wrap up, explain this translation more accurately. Nunca ficamos satisfeitos ao resolver apenas ou outro componente da gestão de localização. Yeah, you can see clearly the suggestion doesn't respect the glossary, but it is rephrasing the sentence in a interesting or compelling kind of way. And let's just do something here, like let's purposely introduce an error here. And let's ask AI to take a look at this. And it's correcting the problem, right? I misspelled questão for question, it corrected that. And it also introduced the verb that I deleted it. The explanation isn't that good because it's explaining that more accurately conveys, but it's not, it should, in my opinion, should be saying clearly, no, there were mistakes, this and this mistake that was fixed. And again, that's something that we're working on, is how to get the explanation to be always the most relevant explanation for any given context. That's not always super good. Let's see here. Okay, so we have Rodrigo saying to stay up to date here. You can, yeah, this is a series. Rodrigo is reminding me of about a few important points. This is a series of 10 webinars. This is the first of the 10. You can take a look. We're going to host these weekly. You can take a look at the future webinars at go.bureauworks.com. And Rodrigo is reminding everybody that this is just one episode of a journey that we've decided, discussing the various aspects that impact translators' lives and the idea of what it means to translate. And that's ultimately what's so exciting to us is, at least in our opinion, GPTs has kind of changed a lot of people's perceptions around what's possible through large language models. I mean, large language models have been around for a long time, but now it seems finally that there's an opportunity to break the machine translation cringe barrier with translators, with companies. I think that there's an opportunity to make things more dynamic, more iterative, and also to really make the translation experience more about thinking critically about what an AI is suggesting, and less about, for instance, I don't know about everyone here, but I mean, one of the things I do pretty often is translate in BureauWorks, and because I like to feel what our engine looks like. And one of the things I don't like, for instance, is when I have to fix a tag from a fuzzy match. I really don't like, for instance, when I have a fuzzy match that's just like requires all this work for fixing, and in the end, the edit distance is relatively small, but all this work around tags and that gets taken care of. Or for instance, ensuring that like the glossary term is taken into account and not having to check 400 times whether all the glossary terms were respected and reframing. So what I've noticed, my personal experience translating with this is just, it's a lot more fluid, it's a lot faster, and I can focus more on making translations excellent as opposed to making translations correspond to the source, if that makes sense. At least that's kind of how we see things, and the opportunity is to make the process a little bit better. So let's see here in the chat. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Boriana. And I think if nobody else has any other questions, I'm going to wrap it up for now and share the recording with everybody. But really want to thank everybody for being here. Really nice seeing Kostya again. It's been a while, and thank you for all the questions. And thank you, James. Thank you everybody, Marina. Really appreciate everybody's presence. And Iverson also, thank you so much for responding what I didn't manage to respond well from Maria. Thank you so much. Iverson, good that you were on the call. And yeah, look forward to the next session. And also, please, if there's any use case that you'd like seen tackled through our webinars, let us know. I'll be happy to take into account any different language combination that you'd like to see, any kind of specific domain that you'd like to see this working on. Our goal really is to use these webinars as an exploration as to what is possible and what's not possible, but really hands-on. I mean, I think that I'm not a very theoretical person. I like to see how things work out in practice. And so we're always open to suggestions around what different people want to be able to see in future webinars. So with that, I really want to thank everybody for your time. Pleasure. I love what we do. I love working with everybody that's here. And thank you again, and wish everybody a great day, great week. And yeah, hopefully, and again, anybody that's interested, just go to our site and you can subscribe the 4-translator plan for free for 14 days and test out what the integration looks like. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great day, great week, and talk to everybody next week. Bye-bye.